My Beehive project has been an ongoing amateur field experiment and theoretical concept of beekeeping that I began in 2017. At the core, my belief is that honeybees are one of the most advanced and evolved organisms on the planet. For over a millennium, humans have been recording and documenting their experiences and knowledge of honeybees. Once we see the precious honey within the hive, we find ourselves overcome with desire, to the point that getting stung or the labor of the bees is no longer of any consequence. Without question, what is going on inside the hive is a mysterious and magical process. My desire to understand this process is stronger than my desire for the actual honey, which is why I am drawn to the relatively unexplored side of observational beekeeping. Similar to an ant farm, this style of beekeeping is predominantly hands-off. Since starting this project, my plan was to collect data that would be used for my own personal project and to share the collected data with anyone that wanted to make use of it, either for art or science. My most recent prototype is the first time I have kept bees or used my own design. It is made of acrylic and stainless steel to create an antimicrobial environment. In order to track the success of my own hive, I also needed to maintain traditional hives. I chose to use BeeMovie hives, which are made of food-safe, commercial-grade NSF plastic. The BeeMovie hives are also resistant to molds and microbes. Honeybees are often referred to as superorganisms because there is no sense of individuality within the hive. All roles are equal because honeybees only work towards the greater good of the hive and protecting the queen. Honeybees live in a matriarchal society, with all bees in the hive serving a single queen. In a healthy established hive, there are approximately 40,000 to 100,000 honeybees. Other than the queen, a healthy hive should be about 80% worker bees and 20% drones. Worker bees are all female. They are responsible for building the hive, foraging, taking care of the brood, and defending the hive. Much like Homer Simpson, drones don't do very much at all. They are big yellow dudes who stay in the hive all day, eating nectar and honey. Installing bees into both hives was far less complicated than I was anticipating, but nerve-wracking nonetheless. The most challenging thing to deal with in the early stages was guiding the bees to build on the foundationless frames correctly instead of cross-comb. Instead of drawing out a single frame top to bottom, cross-comb is when the bees build side to side across multiple frames. They built this way because without foundations, there's nothing to create bee space. Bee space is the term used to describe the gap between any two surfaces within the beehive. It was discovered by Lorenzo Langstroth to be 3/8 of an inch or around 6 to 9 millimeters. I chose to go foundationless because it is a more holistic approach in the long run. Correcting cross-comb in the BeeMovie hives was the most invasive procedure of the entire season. I had to essentially cut apart the entire hive and rubber band everything back in place, a technique I learned from YouTube videos of natural comb beekeeping. Natural comb is more delicate and sometimes falls off the frame if the weather is too warm. Rubber bands are eventually chewed away and fall to the bottom of the hive without harming the bees. During the cross-comb correction, I experienced my first bee stings, which were more severe than I was expecting.
They're angry. Oh! Oh! Ah! Ah! Oh! God damn it! Ow! 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 Fuck! Fuck! Oh! They made it up my pants! Ow! Shit! Oh! Fuck! 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 Oh! Fuck! 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 Ow! Oh! Shit! Ah! Shit!
When classifying the severity of a bee sting, there are 3 levels: mild, medium, and severe. Itchiness, dark red/purplish coloration, and drowsiness occur each time I get stung. After my first stings, I knew that I would have to be extra careful and limit the amount of time working with the bees to a minimum. Knowing that I couldn't peek inside the Apimae hives anymore was disappointing, but I spent more time observing the Sea Hive as a result. I was able to witness and capture the critical moments in the life cycle of a honeybee that even more experienced beekeepers rarely see. I saw bees develop from egg to adult in real time. I spent hours at night watching the bees work. It was still only the beginning of summer, 1 month in their hives, and all three seemed unstoppable. If a colony grows too large, a new hive will be formed, either by finding a new location for a portion or all of the colony to live. This is called swarming. This seemed unlikely to me, because the bees established lots of comb. I truly feel that there is nothing else that I could have done during that time period to improve the quality of life of my bees. The bees did not need me, but my community, my hive, did. The protests began on May 28th, and on May 31st, I drove to the city in my mom's 1989 Volvo station wagon filled with over 1,000 bottles of water to distribute to the protesters with my girlfriend Maya. Nervous about being in the middle of a crowd during a pandemic, Maya and I decided that we could offer support by distributing free supplies. After receiving supplies and cash donations, we were able to participate daily for over 1 month. From the first day of the protests, I had worn my GoPro in a chest harness. On June 28th, I, along with several others, intervened to prevent an unlawful arrest. Police officers violently pushed through the crowd, some on foot, others on Vespas, and pepper sprayed us at close range. The use of pepper spray on defenseless protesters is similar to the use of insecticides on honeybees. In both cases, it is an unnecessary and unjustifiable abuse of power. Participating in the protest helped me to understand the role of a honeybee within the hive and what it means to be working as a superorganism. During the protest, we banded together to protect our collective individuality. There was no I, only we. Just like in the hive, we all had different roles within the protest. Organizers were the queens, followed and protected by worker bees, a small group surrounded by a cluster of thousands. As a supply car, we would have been the foragers, who would fly ahead to find water or food sources for the hive. When I returned upstate from the protest, it was clear that a portion of my bees had swarmed from my left Apimae hive. At first it was disappointing, but there was still enough bees that I thought the hives would bounce back. I decided the best time to overwinter my hives and do the final inspections would be at the end of October.
Completely empty, which leads me to believe that this one has swarmed already.
To my untrained eyes, it was unclear what happened. I was not sure if they had swarmed or become casualties of the varroa mite, parasitic predator of the honeybee. After consulting beekeeping groups on Facebook, I became aware that healthy bees do not swarm that late in the season. And after reviewing photos of hives affected by varroa mites, it became apparent that that's most likely what had happened. I did a brief inspection on that day and noticed the bees clustered in the center of the hive. Beekeepers using wooden hives typically wrap a tarp stuffed with insulation. I covered the hive with a deflated angel wing pool float. I thought the plastic float plus the acrylic would be a good temporary solution. It was snowing the day I put the pool float over the hive, so I figured it could not get much colder. This was without a doubt the worst choice I made all season. In reality, I waited too long before returning to the Sea Hive. Finding an empty hive surrounded by honeybee carcasses and limbs was absolutely devastating, but it was even more upsetting to see bees that had frozen in place within the hive. I was naive to be so confident in my extreme hands-off approach. I gave my last surviving hive a sugar water feeding, which I will do bi-weekly to ensure they survive through the winter. If they do, I will move them into the Sea Hive at the start of the next season. When I began my Sea Hive project, it was completely conceptual. I had no idea if it would work. Many people and several beekeepers were skeptical but challenged me to continue developing the design. To transform an idea into a physical model that actually works gives me the confidence to continue chasing my dreams and explore alternative ways of doing things.